Jesus has moved from preaching to meddling. While the Beatitude part of the Sermon on the Mount causes us to cozy up with warm regard with what belongs to the faithful people of God, here Jesus just steps all over every exposed toe in the sandal-shod people to whom he is speaking. Perhaps we should have come to worship better prepared this morning. No open-toed shoes, no flip-flops, steel-toed boots are what are needed today. Jesus apparently meant what he has said over the last couple of weeks. He is not here to abolish the law, but rather to fulfill it properly. And the righteousness he is demanding from his followers really should exceed that of the Pharisees and the scribes. We forget, as we turn the page with Matthew, that what we have just read is still the Sermon on the Mount. The scene has not changed. The audience remains the same. Jesus, though, is hammering home some teachings that are blurring the line between whether or not we want to keep listening or whether it's time to turn the tail and run. Last week, Jesus was announcing that the kingdom is going public. This week, he tells the public, you must embrace the kingdom. And Jesus does that in a way that will grow familiar as we keep listening to Matthew's story. Jesus talks about embracing righteousness, reminding his listeners that God has established a righteous covenant with people, and that God expects people to establish righteous covenants with each other. It is a new way to see the world, a new life. Imagine healthy, lasting relationships where we view each other as valuable and beloved, where thoughts are not turned inwardly, wondering how we can benefit from a relationship. Instead, we see in each other, we find in each other the grace and the love of God, which gives all of us our value. And that's why Jesus picks actions that are ordinary, either to our experience or to our understanding, that teaches the importance of embracing righteousness. We don't have to visit another culture. We don't have to go to another country. We don't have to go very far outside our own house or our own church to get the point about righteous living. Everything Jesus describes here is talked about here and is understood here. Jesus talks about actions and emotions that are real to us. Anger, adultery, divorce, and swearing oaths. Now the list, well, it hardly seems equal in our estimation. I suspect chances are we would put adultery and divorce on a different level compared to anger and swearing oaths. But Jesus doesn't do that. He speaks to each one, but in speaking to each one, he is speaking to them all. And as Jesus speaks to each one of us, Jesus is speaking to us all. Because every one of those actions that Jesus talks about, every one of those emotions that can boil up inside us can tear down the righteousness of life that God wants people to know. Anger is a sorry channel that can destroy relationships. Adultery takes on more than a physical act. It is the lessening of value that causes others to be seen as objects of pleasure and not as equals for joyful living. Divorce isn't only at a man's whim. No one should exercise that much power or authority over another person. Just give your word. We don't need small print at the bottom of the contract. Let yes be yes, and let no be no. What Jesus sees at stake is the deep and intimate nature of relationships that bring meaning and purpose to life. Jesus teaches that God's desire is for people to enjoy their relationships. But that's hard sometimes because not everybody is always going to get along. We all know the painful truth of that, whether it's in the boardroom or the sanctuary or the bedroom or the playground or high places of government. People are going to get sideways with each other and disagree and not get along. And as all of that unfolds, we're going to find ourselves finding a way to promote our own agenda, develop strategies that will take advantage of another's weakness. We're going to plot and scheme to come out on top. It's what the world has taught us to do. It's how the world turns. It's how our success is measured in our world. But not in the kingdom of heaven. And not for Jesus. And it's not supposed to be that way for Jesus' followers. The truth of the world is that it is only a backdrop so that the members of heaven's kingdom can show the wisdom of Jesus' teachings. That what matters is righteous living. What matters is peaceful coexistence. What's pleasing to God is the successful repairing of our broken friendships and relationships. What satisfies the high standard of the law and the even higher standard of Jesus' kingdom is the practiced love of God and the practiced love of our neighbors. This teaching sets people free. It doesn't bind them down. It sets them free to live in wonderful, healthy, gracious response to the gifts of the kingdom. Jesus does that by teaching that at the heart of the law lies respect for the life of another and regard for the right of another to be who they are created to be, and recognition for everyone as a beloved child of God. I knew a person one time who had every right to live an angry, bitter life. Melissa's life had been made too old when she was too young. And by the time she was a teenager, she had seen more and been through more than anyone should. Her dad was a terrible womanizer, and she had suffered mightily from his too frequent verbal explosions. Her mom was either unwilling or too afraid to do much of anything at all. Kids at school talked about her in hushed whispers mostly, but sometimes in words close enough and loud enough for her to hear. She didn't have to hear them, though, because she knew what they were saying, what they were thinking. And now, as it oft turns out to be, she's in the midst of a self-fulfilling prophecy. 16 and pregnant, nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. She ran away. And she was a crying, angry mess when she stopped by the mission one afternoon. But it was there that she found redemption, her place, her footing. What she found was people who loved her and cared about her without judging her or without dismissing her. She became a regular, and then a volunteer, and then a helper. A doctor who stopped by from time to time to help out with work there got Melissa in to see a doctor friend of hers. And the baby was born vibrant and healthy. A little girl. But as good as the mission had turned out for Melissa, she was still terribly angry, bitter, and hurt. Some wounds, fester. and grow to infection until they contaminate the whole being of a person. Well, one of the people that she had grown to trust told her one day what Melissa didn't want to hear. Stepped on her toes, you might say. She told Melissa that if she ever wanted to be truly whole and completely healed, she had to let go of the anger and the hate that she held on to about her mom and dad. Because, her friend said, all hate will do is eventually corrode the container in which it is carried. So she went and found her mom, and then later found her dad, and she let go of the hate, of the anger. It wasn't easy. The words came hard, and the emotions ran high, because the wounds, as old as they were still fresh and oozing. A beautiful granddaughter helps break the ice. And so too does the faithful act of a wounded daughter who has come to know the freedom of living a righteous life as a kingdom child. Melissa is okay now, a counselor for at-risk youth. And lots of folks have their ideas about why she's okay. But if you talk to Melissa, she will tell anybody that will hear her that she's okay because she heard the call of Jesus to righteous living through the people at the mission. She just says, they showed her that the way it has always been is not the way it always has to be. God's love is in everyone. We have to work to see it in ourselves. We have to work to see it in others. And we have to build relationships that fight against hurt, oppression, anger, any evil thing that would separate us from God or separate us from each other. This is the righteous living of relationships that Jesus not only calls us to do, but teaches us to do. So whatever it is that's pulling us down, whatever it is that is dragging on us, whatever it is that is making us feel that, well, that we're less than who we want to be. I just want to say that the way it has always been is not the way that it always has to be. Or as Jesus put it, you have heard it said before, but I say to you, there is peace, and there is grace, and there is mercy and kindness. There is joy in living a righteous life. This is God's gift to us. This is the good news of righteous living. That through the grace and mercy and peace of heaven's kingdom, it is really possible to see the world, to live a life in a new way, a way that builds things up and doesn't tear them down, a way that brings us together and doesn't separate us. Love God with all you have. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Find in the gifts that have been given to you the capacity and the ability to freely give those gifts to everyone you need. Thanks be to God for this good news and for the grace and mercy of heaven's kingdom. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.